hot from looking at these figures, Mark. I know this was only a couple of minutes ago. What do we know?
Yeah, it's my worst point of the year when we have to go through all these stats. Forgive me, they are pretty impenetrable, but we've just been sort of pouring through the latest migration figures, legal and illegal. So in terms of work visas issued,
and just this to June 2023.
This is the year to June this year,
right?
Basically,
are these the annual ones as well, year on year as well? Have they
it's quarterly, but they go back a year. So just think of it as a year to June this year.
Yeah. Okay.
There were 286,382 work visas that were granted in the year ending June. That's 11% fewer than the previous year. However, to put that in context, it's more than double the 2019 levels. Now, there were 89,095 health and care worker visas granted to main applicants in the year ending June. That is a 26% decrease compared to the previous year, with a notable fall in the latest quarter, April to June, which was down 81%. So basically in the last 3 months, from April to June, a staggering drop of 81%. And a significant proportion of that will be down to the fact that, of course, they've increased the threshold for which you can qualify to come across and work, but also in terms of bringing dependents over, that's been clamped down on, so that will have seen a reduction in the numbers applying for these health worker visas.
As far as we know, Mark, do Labour have any plans to change that, or are they keeping, because obviously that was a Conservative policy?
If they do, I don't know about it as yet.
Okay.
And the thing I think to mention as we go through these stats, the important thing is this is nothing to do with Labour. This is all under the previous government's watch. So any improvements, you know, the current government can't really claim responsibility for any downward trend we're noticing.
It's also just exasperating that if this is good news figures for the Conservatives, that Sunak went so early on his election. Anyway,
Yeah, there you go. No, you're absolutely right. Which is kind of, you know, people, can't really get their heads around why on earth he was going so early when improvements were being noticed, when the Rwanda scheme hadn't even started to see if it would be a deterrent.
Imagine being able to say an 81% reduction in people coming over. I know that's just healthcare sector April to June, but anyway, carry on.
Well, it just adds to what some people believe was a cataclysmic decision to go as early as he did, but there we are. Now, there were 260,392 visas issued to work dependents. So this is important. This is the previous government clamping down on those because, of course, people coming to study or to work were bringing significant numbers of people dependents over, which was just adding to our net migration figures. So 260,000 just over dependents in the year to June, with health and care worker dependents alone accounting for 69% of the total. Now, what I don't have is whether that's a reduction or not. I haven't been able to find that in the stats yet. In terms of students, always interesting. There were 432,225 sponsored study visas, student visas, granted to foreign students in the year ending June 2024. That's 13% fewer than the previous year, but 61% again higher than 2019, just to put it in context there. 2/3, 65% of student visas in the latest year were for master's level courses.
So older students.
And then in the first 6 months of 2024, that's January to June, visas issued to dependents of students fell by 81%.
This is the one a lot of people go on about, isn't it? Why do you need dependents?
Again, you know, this would have been a really good announcement for Rishi Sunak. Fell by 81% to 11,675 compared to the same period in 2023. Now, shall we turn to the boats? We know the figures. They're just over 19,000 thousand compared to the previous year. It's about 10% increase. So it's not that. But what's always interesting about the illegal migration figures are the breakdowns, where the countries are coming from.
Yes.
So the top country represented on these boats was Afghanistan, 5,370 in the year to June. That's followed by Iran, 3,844. Then in third place, Vietnam, just over 3,000. Turkey, just under 3,000. Turkey. But what's happening with Turkey is there's a very particular issue, and that's Turkish Kurds who come and they claim that as Kurdish minority, they're oppressed by the Turkish government, and they usually have a very strong case for asylum.
And there's also a lot of Pakistanis who are coming via the Turkish route, and they say they are coming from Turkey, even though they're not Turkish citizens.
Well, indeed. And they throw their identity documents away.
Wow.
And then in fifth of the top five is Syria with 2,849. Now, what's the interesting thing about those five nationalities that were broken down there? Every single one, bar Vietnam, are countries that the UK government would be powerless to send these people back to. So even if they decide you actually don't fit the requirements for asylum, we're not granting you asylum, they'll get leave to remain anyway, because you can't return them to Afghanistan or Iran or Syria or even Turkey if they're a Turkish Kurd.
Which is where the Rwanda scheme
exactly
worked,
that.
because you could have sent them to Rwanda. You can't return them to Afghanistan or Iran. The other interesting stat that we're learning is 85% of the small boat arrivals in 12 months to March 2024 were male, and the age was recorded, and nearly a fifth were between 25 and 39. And this is what we keep hearing from viewers out there. So many young men still.
Yes, no, of course. That's the demographics. Vast majority young working age men coming over on these boats, with very few women and children. But to go back to your Rwanda point, I think it's an important key point, because something that was never really spoken about in Rwanda, it was always the message they were hammering home was this was the deterrent to the small boats, but it was also the option as well to send people to countries that you couldn't send them back to.
We're going to be talking to you throughout the morning. The government has just released their quarterly migration statistics. Legal migration is down, whilst illegal migration remains steady.
And one stat shows that Afghans make up the biggest nationality crossing the channel in those small boats.
Well, joining us now is GBNews reporter Ray Addison, who is in Clacton, of course, Nigel Farage's constituency for the Reform UK Party. Good morning, Ray. What are the major concerns there about immigration?
Well, I'm here today speaking to residents, to business people and to politicians as well, to find out their reaction to these figures. Tough stance, their announcement of the measures that they're introducing to try and crack down on illegal migration. I'm joined by Councillor of the Reform UK group. Councillor, thanks so much for joining us. What's your reaction to these numbers?
Well, it's difficult to actually fully understand at the moment, because as we've just looked through, you know, the government have released some figures and they're actually rather confusing at the moment as to what they actually mean. The government releases confusing figures. Well, there's a surprise.
Work visas down, the number of dependents is down. There's a general trend that these are smaller numbers, which many people did have concern. Pressure on results.
Numbers, by the looks of them, are still huge numbers. I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and even the 90s up until 97, net immigration was between 30 and 50,000. Last year we saw figures explode to 683,000, and now, you know, if they're slightly down, well, they're still miles away where they need to be. It's like saying if you had a favourite football team, you know, you lost 10-0 last week and now you've lost 8-0 this week, and isn't that a good result? Well, no, it's still an awful result, and that's what most people will view these figures.
Well, I was speaking to a businessman earlier here in Clacton, and he was saying that his business, hospitality and care, they depend on immigrant labour for the workforce, and these figures would be bad news for him. The number of health and care workers, for example, visas issued are down by 26%.
Well, I think that I heard that in the interview, and one of the things that he actually said as well is that he thinks that migrants and illegal migrants should be given the opportunity to work whilst they're here,
whilst they're
claiming asylum. I think that's absolutely a dreadful idea, because all that will do is encourage even more people here to this country. What we should be doing is sending a clear message: if you come to this country illegally, that you to remain in this country. And what we need to do is to tackle this at source, which is to turn the boats around and send these boats back to France, and I think that's what most people actually view. The other thing in terms of working people in this country, I think increase the taxable sort of limit to £20,000. That way, that would encourage more people to come off benefits, make work pay, and actually get people back to work. And I think that would alleviate that problem that the businessman mentioned earlier.
Councillor, thanks very much for joining us. Sadly, we've got to end it there just purely for time, but we are speaking to people throughout the entire day here in Clacton. We might even pop down to the air show as well and get the thoughts of people there.